All right, this is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company, coming at you Wednesday evening after the Wolves. It's the final score: Wolves 94, Raptors 97, an opening night loss in Toronto. I'm here with Kyle Teige, and we're going live here on YouTube. We're going to do this occasionally for some of the road games that I'm not at. So welcome to those of you who are listening here live, and thanks for those of you who are listening, tapping in on Thursday morning. Kyle, I tweeted this out at one point during the game, or as after the third quarter, the Wolves were up 74-73. And at the time, and I think this proved true in the fourth quarter, was a bad game for the double big look, specifically the Cat and Gobert element of that. Ant had an inefficient shooting night, and they got boat raced in transition by Toronto. Yet they lose this game by 3. And I just put here in my notes, it was one of those games where if they do if the double big thing is 5% better, if Ant is 5% better, if the transition defense is 5% better, they win this game, I think. And I don't know if that is encouraging or concerning. Are you with me here? Are you tracking on those things? Are those concerning to you, or are you like, this team is a few small adjustments away from making this work?
You know what the beauty of Wolves back is that we kind of forget Wolves back means like not playing transition defense, right? Like still not rebounding the ball. Although I will say I was kind of just box score hunting now. Mm-hmm. Anthony Edwards had 14 rebounds. I knew he was aggressive, but that kind of stood out. They actually out-rebounded Toronto 62-47. Jace said this during the game on Twitter, but they played like a big team, which is kind of something we've talked about, for the last 6 months. It's like, okay, like you're big, embrace being big. You build up all off-season that this team and their win projections and all this stuff. I didn't come out of that game. I thought they played like absolute ass, like everything. Like there are so many things you're like, oh, that's concerning. That's concerning. That one I wrote down in my notes. And they lost by 3, late 3 at the end, but they never were really out of it. So you can kind of go glass half full, glass half empty. I do want to preface it because then I have a question to just get it started with you. Jaden McDaniels didn't play. Hopefully he plays on Friday or Saturday. They did not lose the game because Jaden doesn't play, although he would have, Nah didn't really have a shot going. They could have just used his size on Siakam. But I'm curious I've been thinking about this. We've talked about it offline. What if everything the Wolves do works except the starting 5? You know what I mean? Like, do they have the least malleable starting 5 in the league because you really can't? Like, Kyle was awesome again tonight, right? Like, how do you not find ways to close with him? They're just going to have too many guys, and we might get to a point, Dane, like December, January, that, and again, this is one loss. Super not concerned about it, whatever. But that you're going to have to really start to think about how you close games with one big and then 4 other guys that can kind of do more stuff. Because I don't know, man, that was my one concern. It wasn't the offense, which I'm sure you can educate us on. It's more of, I don't love how they closed. I just don't love closing with Carl and Rudy right now.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of a half measure to close with Kyle, but at the 3, right?
Yeah, right.
I knew he was going to close with Kyle. Right. And so that's what provoked me to think, I'm like, okay, is he gonna bench Rudy or Cat to close the game? And I think just if you're going off of that one game, of the two, the one who played better was, I thought Rudy played a really good game. And I think the answer to why they were bad in many areas, but this game was close, is the half-court defense was really good. When it wasn't transition, they locked up, and a lot of that had to do with Rudy. But so I was like, okay, well, it's going to be Rudy. I feel pretty confident he's going to close with Kyle because everything was a little scrambled, right? And then you're like, okay, well, Cat's never not closed a game. I think he will do. And there was the trapdoor of like, okay, Jaden's not playing. We can play Kyle at the 3. Not going to always have that option there, but it's going to be interesting, man. Once in the games when Jaden is back, and if there are more games like this where clearly the Cat and Rudy together minutes are not good, does Finch does Finch push through there and still try to go with it? So tonight, I don't know. I feel like if Jaden McDaniels plays and everything else all holds the same, I don't think that Finch does close with both Cat and Rudy, but maybe everything is different in the game. Butterfly effect of Jaden's there. Maybe Ant is more efficient with Jaden out there. Maybe the transition defense is better with Jaden playing there. I don't think we can make like a strong proclamation about closing lineups when they didn't have one of the 5 guys who I think is almost always going to close the game. So I just leave it kind of like a question mark, you know?
That's fair. Also, just looking again, first game, the only reason I would say you'd be concerned is just because it's the Timberwolves, right? And you have all this positivity and undefeated preseason, and they come out again and just, I mean, they didn't look like the team you watched in the preseason, and they didn't play really any sort of competition, right? I guess the Bulls kind of played their starters for the most part, but other than that, the Dallas Mavericks, I've been pretty vocal, I think are going to be really bad. But just to come out and have the offense look as stagnant, I mean, the turnovers they only had 14 turnovers, which is the same amount as Toronto had. But their turnovers seemed like they were worth 2 every time because they were stupid. And every time they turned the ball over, the Raptors just sprinted. Mm-hmm. Like every miss they sprinted, but the Wolves took 100 shots. That's like I'm not sure the last time I saw a team have 100 field goal attempts. So just kind of going through team stats, just because I actually think it's pretty interesting. They had less fouls than Toronto, 14 for the Wolves, 18 for Toronto. More points in the paint. What else? I think it was the same amount of steals, less assists, which goes back to just they completely went away from the Finchian style of offense. 62 to 47 rebounds, like I said, 100 field goal attempts, more free throws, better free throw percent. They just played, like statistically it looks like they played better than them, but when it came down to little executions, like this one just sticks in my brain, but towards the end there, when you need points and you need probably a 3, you have the best shooting big man possibly of all time out behind the 3-point line, and he's throwing it to Rudy in the paint on a dumb turnover. Like, do you see these little things and decisions? Like, I remember when Nikhil got a rebound and he was getting in transition, he tried to throw it to Ant. Ant wasn't even looking. Ball goes out of bounds. Just little plays that didn't really allow them to ever blow a lead up. I think their biggest lead was 6. So everything was just a little half step slow. Again, Toronto, as you and Jace did a really good job.
Yeah, it's a bad matchup. Right?
It's a bad matchup. Like, and I know if you're a cynic, you can be like, well, if the Toronto's a bad matchup, but they're not even a good team, like, I don't know. I think
people
stylistically,
didn't listen to that. What we're talking about is what Toronto. The two things. If you look at the Toronto team from last year, which while they have a new coach, has a pretty similar roster, basically just swapping in Schroeder for Van Vliet. They dominate the turnover battle. That's something they've done for the past like 3-4 years. Last year they forced the highest rate of turnovers and they turned the ball over themselves at the lowest rate. Plus, they were the most frequent transition team in the league last season. Like it was, as I didn't really start looking into Toronto until like the past couple of days. I was like, ooh, this is going to be a test of how the Wolves have gotten better in the areas that they were bad at last year, which are because those are the things that Toronto is good at themselves. So I think it is fair to say that some of this, maybe particularly to the Cat Rudy double big stuff, was a product of the opponent. But it's also fair to say that this didn't look better than the first few games of last season. Right. You know?
I'd be remiss if I didn't take a quick 30 seconds here. Because I'm kind of getting COVID vibes, right? You and I are back after a game with headphones on what appears to be a pimped out Zoom, but 427 people right now on YouTube. So shout out to everyone that is tuning in. I know we're going to try to do this throughout the season, kind of like you said at the top. Let's just get right into instant analysis. And then if you're more of a traditional podcast listener on Apple or Spotify, it'll be out in the morning. Yep. But yeah, if you are in the chat or watching us on YouTube right now, please subscribe. Thanks for coming in. I'm going to start reading the chats here in a sec. But
yeah, Coop in the background. If you see people having questions or whatever, maybe later at the end, like just flag a couple of them. We'll try and hit.
Shout out Cooper Carlson. He's like our nephew Kyle on this Bill Simmons Dane Moore pod. But no, you had a graphic back there that was like the NBA box score. Yeah. That you had on the screen, and really everything I was just saying. I do like looking at team stats. It's just it's hard to keep track of all that stuff in the moment. So that's always my favorite tab on ESPN. But what you just said right there, that's it. Look at that. Their two best players both had more turnovers than assists. That completely flies in the face of what they did in the preseason, and that's probably where all the blame should go. It's like as good as Ant was and as good as Carl was, for those guys to combine for 7 turnovers and 4 assists, the ball was so sticky. The ball just never moved around. It seemed like Ant, who again made a lot of fun plays, was determined to dribble out or around double teams, just didn't have that trust for his teammates. The bench wasn't great, right? Shake Milton had a really tough first go of it in the first half. Obviously, Kyle was really good. Nas had his moments, but that's it, really.
Let's lock in on Ant. Like
you got to make more. Ant can't play that many minutes and have the ball in his hands that many times and have 1 assist. You just can't do it.
If people miss the game or the beginning of the game, it sounds weird. I was not anticipating this. A main takeaway after the game that it was going to be a bad Ant game or an inefficient Ant game. He scored the first 10 points of the game. He looked like that special isolation player that a team, even with a bunch of long, good defenders, did not have an answer for. And what did he finish this game with? If he had 10 in the first 4 minutes, I can't really see my own screen here. It's very small.
26 points on 8 of 27 shooting.
8 of 27 and 4 of 20 from 2-point range. And that's the thing, right? With Ant is where does the discipline come in on shot selection? And he's an elite shot maker. He can be, but everyone is human. And when you're taking more difficult, more contested shots in that 2-point range, particularly the mid-range, where he's always not been a highly effective scorer, that's going to be the problem. Obviously, it's good to see him shoot 4 for 7 from 3. That has to be and is a special part of his game. But man, after how hot he started, I mean, honestly, after the first quarter, I was like, all right, Ant starts hot in that first stint there. Carl doesn't do anything, but he subs out, comes back in for Rudy. Cat's playing the 5, and he kind of kills it to the end of the first quarter. I'm like, well, all things considered, wonky roster, that's a pretty good rhythm. Like, Ant goes, Cat goes once he's in at the 5, and then it felt like they couldn't ever really get back either of those things in a major way, and also Cat never played better when he was next to Rudy. It was in the first half, I had it down. He played 8 of his 11 minutes at the 4 or 8 of his 19 minutes next to Rudy at the 4, so probably about half his minutes next to Rudy. And I think he only had like 5 points when playing next to Rudy, one of which was that 3-point heave with like 4 seconds left in the game. It's just, I don't know. The biggest thing I'm concerned about leaving that game is like, what the heck, Cat and Rudy, when you're out there together, it was a tough hang. It was a tough hang. And Ant wasn't able to kind of be the tide that carries all boats, we've
lost you.
He only was for the first 5 minutes, really.
Jared Martinson, who is a homie and does good work for Canis, said that the Wolves starting lineup tonight shot a true shooting percentage of 38.2% while on the floor together. Not a huge advanced numbers guy, but I know that's bad and that shouldn't happen again. I was just kind of, again, just running around all these different stats. The Raptors shot 14 of 35 from 3 for 40%. Wolves shot 8, 31, 25%. The Raptors were 29th last year. 28th last year in 3-point percentage. So I want – Coop just said that the chat was upset. If you're upset about that loss, you should be, because, like, again, this is a new level of –
upset about the loss, or they upset about us being upset?
Yeah, they might be upset about us. No, This is different now, right? Like, yeah, you have a pick in 8 or 9 months. You got a lot of talent. Your guys are signed, but like, these are the types of games that I'll say it because I'll take the blame. You can give them an excuse in October. We are still like 6 days away from Halloween, but this is the type of stuff that a lot of these guys have done over their careers, especially guys like Carl and Ant. Just weird decision making in big spots. You got to clean that up sooner than later. because this Western Conference is going to be a bloodbath where it's like, we'll forget about this game probably if you come back home and rebound literally and make some more shots. But there's just too many times in that game where those, and that's why I go back to that weird question at the top. Again, Nikhil starts for Jaden tonight. That looked successful in the preseason, but when Nikhil's not very good and he missed, I think, every shot he took except for one, he missed all 3 threes. It just, that's another thing. It's like, okay, we're already kind of clogging up the spacing by playing 2 guys that are 600 pounds. We got to be able to hit threes when they're open in the corner and not having Nikhil do it, not being able to get really anything out of Troy Brown Jr. Shake was weird. So I think if you kind of start to peel it back and have a drink or 6, like maybe just make some more shots. And that's what Grady said on the call, right? He's like, Toronto's kind of shooting the piss out of the ball, and if Minnesota could have made a couple more, but it's also if you're a coach or you believe in the old school coaching philosophy, like had they have hit a couple more threes and they would have snuck that one out, would you have felt that much better about it? Right. Because I don't think I would have.
Yeah, no, but then it can go the other way too, where you're like, all right, we won despite all these red flags. So yeah, I don't know what the right direction is there, and I think probably it's to look at the things that were really concerning, which I think we did, and to also highlight the things that were really good and ask ourselves which ones were more sustainable, and to take the positive spin on it. I kind of mentioned this with Rudy, but the defense, the rim defense, when Toronto wasn't in transition, it was a half-court set. They locked up. The last season, these numbers up here somewhere. Last season, the best half-court defense was Memphis, and they allowed 93.6 points per 100 plays. Tonight, the Wolves allowed 72 points per 100 plays in the half court. So it was an elite number in the half court there. The issue is that the Wolves themselves only scored 76.3 points per 100 possessions in the half court as well, right? So we know this team is a very good half court, a very bad transition defense team, but was last year a very good half court defensive team when Rudy was on the floor. That happened again. So to my question of what was good and what can sustain, I think we can anticipate the Wolves again being a really good half court defensive team, because they were last year when Rudy is on the floor. And we saw that again here tonight.
Carl and Ant were 16 of 52 from the field. I thought Carl finished with 19 points, 10 rebounds.
Again, not a sustainable thing. That is not something we are going to bank on happening, going forward.
Carl hit that 3 right essentially when time expires to put him at 2 for 10. Offensively, I thought he was really, really bad. And
except for the little bit of time when he was out there without Rudy, man, that was good.
Can I finish?
Sorry.
Except for when he was out there by himself and he just went play after play, posting him up and just kind of cooking Siakam. But what I was trying to say is offensively, as a total package, I thought his 36 minutes were pretty meatless. I thought he was pretty good defensively, especially around the rim. Like, blocks aren't all, but I just thought he kind of held his own down there. He had a couple kind of transition shifting, momentum changing blocks. In the moment, I don't know. I don't know if you can think of in the moment what you remember him guarding on the perimeter and all that stuff, but I did think, I don't know. There's not a lot of times when Karl-Anthony Towns would have 4 blocks, so I thought that was kind of nice to see. But the offensive part, when Ant didn't have it, you would hope that it could kind of spin to Karl, and that would open things up again. And that's a horrendous number for those 2 guys to shoot like that.
Yeah, to the Cat defense point, and a lot of times, if I'm being honest, like to really be able to dissect this stuff, particularly the defensive stuff, I got to watch it again, which I will do tomorrow morning, and Britt and I will talk tomorrow afternoon. But what I did have down in my notes about Karl defensively, the first thing I had was, man, Karl's guy is taking a lot of threes. And I was kind of cool with it because I'm not scared of Scottie Barnes, but then it kind of rotated over to Siakam, and it seemed like they were going under a bunch, and they're somewhat willing to allow that. Obviously, I don't know what the game plan exactly was there, but I had that written down for a defensive note on him. The very first possession, we talked about when Karl got in there and he started scoring offensively, the very first possession, Toronto ran a pick and roll, Carlson drop, and they throw it right over his head, and Toronto gets an easy bucket. So I would say in coverage, he wasn't good. at the rim, just straight rim protector.
Yeah.
Like rotating those sort of things. Yeah, the 4 blocks is, I think, a pretty good and, fair way to assess what he was doing defensively there. I don't know if I'd give it like an A for what his defense was, particularly because compared to Rudy, I thought Rudy was really good defensively tonight. But yeah, it's going to be the stagger thing, right? We know Karl's going to be able to cook at the 5 offensively. The question then becomes, what do those defensive numbers look like when Karl's out there without Rudy? And obviously that's kind of going to be to be determined. It's just such a weird switch to flip from going, your center is strictly a defensive player to your center being almost strictly an offensive player. Those are the things that can be spun as a positive too, that are going to take time for a group to get used to.
It's like driving on an interstate. I always think of back home, like Grand Forks to Fargo. But like if there were just like 5 different crazy speed limits in that hour drive, like it's like, hey, the speed limit right now is 75. And then they sub Rudy on. It's like, actually now the speed limit's 40. Like just all of a sudden. But it's like in 10 miles, the speed limit now is 95. Yeah. I was speaking of Rudy, I just off the top of your dome, like I thought Rudy played pretty well. There was a couple rebounds that he gave up. Then in the moment I was like, my God, dude, you gave up another one. You gave up another one. The Raptors only had 8 offensive rebounds. So it wasn't, again, the rebounding thing, something that has been a bugaboo for this franchise dating back to the Grizzlies series 2 years ago. They rebounded the hell out of the ball. But it's when Toronto got defensive rebounds or steals that they would just, I mean, that was almost cool to watch in the moment, because that's like, they might have been the only thing they said in like pregame stuff was like, hey, when we get the ball, just sprint. Just sprint.
Well, and it's like a blood in the water thing, right? Once you kind of like, oh, like this works. Like we're going to keep, I mean, that was the third quarter, right? Like it was just, and the Wolves were turning it over a lot, but you can kind of, we saw this last year, right? Where some teams, they kind of get a taste of running the Wolves in transition and then they don't stop, right? So then it becomes on the Wolves to, take a stand there. And those are the times where if you're Finch, you got to tell the bigs, like, maybe we're not crashing both, There needs to be, I think, adjustments maybe throughout the flow of the game based on how good or bad your transition defense is in relation to how much you're going after the glass. Kyle, let me do the ticket giveaway announcement. Cool. We are giving away 2 tickets for the Wolves Nuggets game. It's the second home game. It's November 1st. The Genesis Company is providing these tickets to 2 Wolves fans who obviously listen to the podcast and are Patreon subscribers. So for those of you who've been longtime Patreon subscribers, thank you very much. And just send us a message on Patreon that you are available to attend that game. Everyone loves free tickets, but we only want to give them to people who are able to go to that game. I believe it's a Wednesday. So let us know on Patreon. Send us a message that you're available for that. And if you want to sign up for Patreon, patreon.com/DaneMoreNBA. That should be also in the show notes if you're listening to this the next day. You want to get back into rebounding?
Well, no, I'm just kind of like, everyone's watching me like look to the left on my other monitor. I really think that sucked. Like, I was ready to like deflate the dinosaur that I popped up last time to say the Raptors are dead.
I thought that's Godzilla or Garzilla.
Garzilla. I really do kind of think that this team has some issues, and Grady said this on the call as well. Like, Chris Finch is going to have a heyday going over the film on this one, because Finch is just going to yell at him, and he's got control of that puppy, and he's just going to be like, "What are we doing here? Why are we not getting back? I really think the Toronto Raptors, the more and more you look at it, and I'm looking, like, they just hit a lot of shots, and how much of that was the defense, right? But I don't know, man. 34 for 100 is not something, as you might say, oh my God, Ant had 14 rebounds. Yeah, I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think that's something, although I will say one thing I wrote down, he just looks like a completely different athletic specimen than he did as a rookie. He can just go and sprint for a while. He used to be so damn tired and hands on his knees. That's great. I mean, that's what you kind of want from this next evolution of him, but I don't think he's going to get 14 rebounds every night. I just can't see him shooting 34 for 100, man. I can do the math on that, so that's 34%. Like, I just don't think that's really sustainable. So maybe it's a little more space in the floor. I I don't know, the Shake Milton stint, one game, not a big deal, wasn't great. And I did kind of, I don't know, wrote down like Jordan McLaughlin, question mark. Would that have been a pace changer? But they rely on Kyle so much in that second unit now that it's just, they still have a lot of good pieces. I don't think you can come away from that being like, oh, they're not deep. Nope, they're very deep. But this is the one thing, and we talked about it in our bold predictions and our previews, is like Finch has to be really good at all the buttons he pushes game in and game out because he has all the guys to win certain games, but he has to make sure that those lineups and those 5-man rotations are about as perfect as they can get. And tonight, they stumbled. They didn't get much from their bench. And then when they put the starters back out there, they just kind of deflated.
Yeah, and that's the not having Jaden in the game changes what the bench is, right? Definitely not a good bench game. We did see Troy Brown Jr. Play in this game. That was the 9th guy in the rotation. As Nickeil moved into the starting lineup, they added a wing into the rotation. I don't think we anticipate Troy Brown being in the rotation when the season is actually going on. But I'm curious to see, and I guess hopeful to see the bench play better when Nickeil's part of it, and then maybe Nickeil in turn himself play better. The shot was not there for them. Like, they seemed in the preseason like a very competent 3-point. I don't think this is a talented 3-point shooting team. Like, obviously Carl is an elite 3-point shooter, but as a whole group, I don't see this to be a good 3-point shooting team. But that was one of my main takeaways from the preseason. And it's like, well, maybe an average 3-point shooting team because they seem confident. And that one corner 3 that Nas missed by about 7 feet, pretty much every time Nickeil was spotted up, and Shake early, like those guys did not look confident beyond the 3-point arc. And again, there's probably another one you can spin in a positive direction too, of like first game jitters, this and that, because we did see the group look like a 3-point shooting team and a confident 3-point shooting team in the preseason.
Shout out to Coop. He's putting all these comments on there that are entertaining the hell out of me on YouTube. But Josh Porman said, feels like the Vikings losing to the Bucks week 1. Kind of like that. If you're a Vikings fan, like, I know the Bucks have been up and down, but I still, this has nothing to do with optimism, by the way. Like, cut that shit. I just think that they're still really good, and they're going to iron out some of these things. And maybe the Jaden piece, I mean, God forbid, he just had his, they had a 122nd press conference today for him, but he just announced his contract extension. Like, maybe there might not be 3 teams in the league I'd rather watch Jaden play against than the Raptors. Because the Raptors are a bunch of Jadens, right? Just tall guys that their arms keep getting bigger.
A bunch of Jaden and Nas's.
Yeah, right? OG Anunoby he didn't lead the team in scoring. That was Dennis Schroeder, who also, by the way, filled in like admirably for Van Vliet. They might be pretty good with him. But Anunoby was the best player, shot 4 for 9 from 3. But that kind of went back to a couple minutes ago, and you said, I think the guy that Carl was on just was making a lot of threes because Carl was maybe a half step off him behind the 3-point line. A lot of those, I feel like, if you go back and watch again, was Anunoby hitting him over Carl. That's probably just Jaden on him, right? Like, that's just maybe you can take one of those guys away a little more, but we'll see. It's a bummer to not have him because he is paid to be the best defender on this team and also a glue guy to kind of just keep things going. He can also get out in transition, right? He puts his head down like his brother and just starts running straight forward. But that they missed him tonight, and as much as we're like, well, if Ant ever went down with an injury, like, how do you replace him? They did not have a great way to replace Jaden tonight. Nah gave him basically the bad Josh Hart game. I mean, Nah was still all over the place, but he gave them nothing offensively. It was a minus 17. Got a couple boards that were nice, but they just need that 5th starter, ideally Jaden, for 81 games to really be able to stretch the floor, keep things spaced, and then also, too, like, throw them on the best guy every night. That's kind of just the shutdown cornerback in him, is just throw him on a guy, throw him on OG Anunoby, throw him on Jimmy Butler on Saturday, and hope that will make everything else around them, the defense, look better.
We'll take some questions from the YouTube comments here shortly. I do want to talk about the matchups and how the Wolves chose to match up in this game because, as I talked about this week, I was curious to see what that looks like if Jaden didn't play. Kind of, this is to the Toronto as a funky matchup sort of thing. You remove the Jaden pin from that matchup defensively, probably on Siakam, and you go, okay, well, what are the Wolves going to do here? Who's going to start? Is like Do you start Kyle so he can guard Siakam? That was what my guess was. It ended up being Nikhil who started the game, and I thought it was interesting. They put Nikhil on Schroeder, guarding the point guard. They want Nikhil at the point of attack, and then they put Conley on Anunoby to be the chaser, 3-point guy, and then they put Ant on Siakam. Which when I was with Jace, I said that's what I want Ant to be able to. I want Ant to be able to take that role. I think he can stand up the big physical drivers that even if when they're taller than him, and it allows Jaden to not be in that situation. It allows Carl tonight. It allowed Carl to not have to guard Siakam as often, and you put Carl on Barnes, the non-shooter of the group. The wrinkle in that and why it felt like Carl was defending, like air quotes, as many 3-point shots is because they put him on Barnes, the non-shooter. Well, Barnes clearly spent his whole summer trying to shoot threes so he could start shooting threes this season, and he did, and he fired him. So I don't know. It's interesting. This every matchup I think with this team more than other teams is really interesting in how they decide to pick their matchups, given that you're not always going to want to have Carl on the 4 if it's a driving 4, if it's a running around chasing 3-point shooting 4. How do you pivot off of that? And I thought it was interesting with Nikhil that they went with Nikhil, but that they didn't put Nikhil on Siakam. They put him on the ball on Schroeder there, and I wasn't obviously tracking this throughout the game. We obviously saw Ant on different players and Carl on Siakam and stuff like that sometimes. But how you start a game is usually pretty indicative of what your favorite matchups are. And so I'm going to keep that saved as we're starting to look at different opponents down the line here with, Miami and Atlanta. And I think the next game after that is Denver, because they're going to have to find a rhythm for that of matchups, and what that means for Carl in particular, I think is critical. Where can Carl guard best? That is a huge question with this team, big picture. Now that he's playing the 4. So
Scottie Barnes was 3 steals away from a 5x5. Just a classic like Scottie Barnes game.
Only 3 away.
He was. He had 5 blocks. He's an interesting player. I mean, again, they just have a bunch of Jadens on the team. Speaking of Jaden, he didn't get any fouls tonight, so that's a positive.
Dude, I guess. Do not get why. I mean, I'm not saying Scottie Barnes is a bad player, but it is like one of those guys where you're reading articles, you're going on Twitter, and it's one of those young guys that everyone loves. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, I'm sure they're probably watching more Scottie Barnes than I am, but it is never. This is just a tangent, like side tangent. Like he has never struck me to be anywhere near as special as the way I have seen him be pitched to me via the interweb. Like I wasn't super worried about Carl guarding Barnes.
There was a couple early threes where it was like as soon as he was the one. I mean, again, they all are.
He shot 28 from 3 last year.
Right, and he shot 25% tonight, 1 for 4. Look at that. When he was taking them, though, you're like, okay, let him shoot. Right, it was more of like the OG Anunoby, Schroeder, Siakam guys. But yeah, I think the defense thing too is they probably weren't banking on not having their starting 5. It's one game again, whatever. But I don't know, that is something to start to track. Right, is like in games that they don't play Jaden. Do they switch it up? Like I did think coming into this game,
or Jaden foul trouble, right?
Right, Jaden in foul trouble. Like I thought, well, maybe I woke up this morning thinking maybe Kyle Anderson would start at the 3, but Finch must have just loved the idea of having him in that second unit and stuff. But I don't know. I don't think that would have swung the result of the game. But yeah, I don't know. Just Nikhil didn't really stop anyone. Was undersized at times when he was in his matchup, and then didn't give him anything. And if that's just Jaden in the corner for those 3 threes, maybe he hits them. Again, I can't really pivot my brain off of 16 for 52. Yeah, we might just be a month or a week from now or a month from now being like, remember that one game when they shot really, really, really bad? That might just be it. So things to work on. I'm sure they'll have some different rotations. They just the shooting, and then not to pick on Carl. It's just those are the plays that stick in my head. He had that one. It kind of pump faked at the 3-point line and then slowly dribbled into the paint and was like 7 or 8 feet away, but still threw the lob. It was like a possession after he had tried a floater that didn't go in. Just these little things that we didn't see in the preseason. And you kept talking about they shot really confidently in the preseason. They also just played really confidently. And how much of that is because they were shooting confidently? But they resorted tonight to that team that was kind of like, I saw someone said that they were soft in the chat. Like they just kind of got punched in the mouth a couple times and they stood back up, but they never really threw a punch, especially in that second half. And I know that's a loaded phrase there, but they never really threw a punch back, and that's going to have to change as well. So whether that be adding Jaden into the mix or getting Nas more minutes, but disappointing result to lose 97-94 in a game that you played pretty bad, but you also really could have won the game.
Let's grab some of these questions here that Coop's putting up on the board. We have Du Bois Austin S says, did it seem like Cat and others were nervous to fire the 3-ball off a catch? Felt like the Dominican Republic trigger was different tonight. Yeah, I think that's tied into confidence, right? To have spacing, you not only need to confidently shoot, you probably need to shoot them
right
quickly. I think that's a good observation there. I didn't totally write that down myself. Again, probably something I would need to look back at, but I know with Carl, it certainly wasn't Dominican Republic version of Carl where he was looking to gun, in that first stint. I know Ant was rolling a little bit, but it would have been nice to have, it would have been easy to have a possession where in semi-transition, whatever, like Carl does kind of gun one. I think he did take a 3 early on, but it wasn't that same nature, right, that we saw in FIBA from him and that we, I think, saw in the preseason.
This is disgusting that I remember this, but he missed his first 2 because Grady was really pointed out that, and then he hit his third one. He was 1 for 3. Then he missed his next 6 to go 1 for 9, and then he hits that one with 0.3 seconds left. But yeah, that would be one thing. Is like, okay, he missed his first 2. If I'm Finch or whatever, I don't think a Karl Anthony Towns 3-pointer, no more context for you, that's it, is a bad shot, right? Like, I just think if that man has the laces lined up, let it fly. So I would hope, and you've been on this for a while, it's like he's never been the type to just, I'm 0 for 7, but watch me take this 8th one. He's going to like drive or pass or do something else. Like, just continue to let it fly, because that is what opens this up.
And be confident in your off the dribble 3-point game. I always do the step back thing, but it isn't only that. It can be like being a motion 3-point shooter as a big is extremely rare. I was listening to some point this preseason, Kevin Pelton and Zach Lowe talking about Wemby and Chet and how what can make them so special is the fact that they are 5s who can shoot the 3 and that they can do it off the bounce. And both of them are like, no other big in the league can do that. And in my head, immediately, I'm like, well, I know Carl can do that. I know Carl doesn't do that.
Right.
That might be the bag he has to get into when the other things aren't working or he's not getting a shot, and might particularly when he's playing the 4 out there with Rudy in the dunker spot, that might not be like, put your head down and get all the way to the rim time. And if a swing isn't there, whatever, like, I don't mind if it's decisive and confident to make that a bigger part of his game. I've been saying this for 3-4 years. I think that is the next horizon for Carl as a 3-point shooter, is more volume as an off the dribble. Like, I'm not saying sitting there cross. I'm saying like one dribble, bam, step to the side, you've taken the shot in half a second. Like, this isn't him turning into James Harden. It's him turning into Karl Anthony Towns, who he already is. I don't get it. I don't get it.
This is a good one from Jordan Wilhelmy, and maybe something you can give us a small answer to now and marinate on for tomorrow with Britt. But how does Finch not institute running more offensive sets to get easier shots, especially during that chaotic third quarter? Is it on the players, or is he poor at getting through to them? I don't think it's that, and I'm not just being pro Finch. I think it's got to be on the players a little bit, right? Like, you can't.
I don't know, man. That was less structure than we were pitched.
Okay.
I think so. Again, probably go back and watch it more. I saw out of timeouts. I saw at the beginning of quarters a scripted action for sure, a structured action. Way probably too much for my liking. Way too much flow and figure it out. Again, another thing that looked like the beginning of last season, where I mean, a couple different pieces. You got Mike out there instead of D'Lo, but like, I do not think they found the balance of structure versus flow in that game at all, because I felt like the structure element was just not really there.
I go back to, again, my take, and then I'm going to cook dinner, is that they just missed a lot of shots. And it's an 82-game season. It's not trying to spin it or anything. It's just they shot. I mean, if shooting the piss out of the ball is good, they shot the shit out of the ball, which is bad. And just got to recover on Saturday. But I also think it's kind of poetic that there were moments in this game where everything felt a little more controlled and I wasn't as nervous. And that's when Mike Conley and or Kyle Anderson was on the court, right? You would agree? And those are the two guys that, for people that are subscribing to the YouTube channel, and you did a whole cap breakdown the other day of what the Jaden extension means and who are the two guys most likely kind of on the burner.
We got to get your Jaden takes.
Well, I'm just, when Kyle and Mike are out there, things are controlled. There seems to be a lot of structure, and they get really good shots. Those are two guys that I cannot say with a bullet are part of the long-term plan, right? Just because of their age. So it has to be Ant. It has to be Carl. Jaden when he gets back in the mix. But you have those two guys. You got to figure out how to play them. I don't know if you can play Mike and Kyle at the same time. But, yeah, I think it's a really good question, because there just wasn't a lot of – there's a lot of dribbling the ball. It just didn't look like anything in the preseason. As someone said in the chat, it looked a lot like last season, especially when it was really rough early on. So is this like game 26 of the big experiment and they still need a little more time? Maybe, right? Or are you starting to find, again, at the top, like I said, where everything can work and all the pieces can click, except when you put that five-man lineup out there?
Mm-hmm. We got James Evans here. Rudy running the floor hard was a great sign, but will he keep that up all year? I will say, from having talked to some people in the organization, that is a huge point of emphasis. And like with Rudy in particular, because that is going to open up things for this team, and it's going to open up more easy opportunities for Rudy offensively himself, where, again, you don't need to script shots for him. If he's just running, he's gonna get a handful of those. So to answer James's question, I think yes, I would bet on Rudy running the floor significantly more than he did last season, because I know that's a point of emphasis, and I have heard that's something that Rudy's pretty on board for there as well. Coop, there was another question from Chris Lupos that was also about Rudy. I started reading it, and I was like, that's a good question. And then we were talking. Did you guys notice the bounce? Oh yeah, there we go. The bounce in Rudy's step that he didn't have last season. I definitely did. I will say,
I have a hand up. I'd like to answer that, Chris.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Because I think you and I might have had a little spit about that, or a spat earlier this October. Rudy Gobert is more athletic and healthier than he was last year. I also agree with your nuanced take that it also comes down to being a little more comfortable, right, with his teammates, with the system and all that stuff. But back to the last question, he just looks springier, and he was running in transition more. And that's all stuff to say, like, that's good. That just makes me feel good that if this is I just honestly thought Rudy was pretty awesome tonight. He plays a position that he's going to get dunked on or have embarrassing moments, like any cornerback who's up against a really good wide receiver. But I thought he was really good tonight, and I thought his athleticism looked different than it did to start last season. So that's like a small victory, right? It's like, if this is, what did you just say? They want him to start sprinting in transition both ways more. I thought that was a positive and something to monitor. Like, is he still doing this on December 10th? Is he still doing this on February 2nd?
Yeah, I think is he healthier? And because if he's healthier, he looks springier and more athletic. I also believe that with more trust and confidence in those around him on both sides of the floor, he's just going to look that way more. And I would say to anybody listen to this, and you could blocks aren't always the best way to look things up, but I know you could just go click on for like the however many blocks he had.
He just caught one. That was crazy.
But look at his surrounding teammates, and he's not freaking out about what they're doing behind him.
Right.
And that is what gets you to go for a shot, to go block it, to contest it, to do those sort of things. It wasn't just the blocks. They were a great defensive half-court team, again, like they were last season. They can be the good half-court team that they've been since Rudy been here defensively, and he can block some more shots to lead to some more intimidation. That's going to be an elite defensive team. And I think tonight, again, that was an encouraging element from that of something going forward.
Shout out to Aaron Harkis, who has a really good we're going to, again, please subscribe if you are on YouTube right now. Appreciate everyone still hanging out. We're going to try to do more of these, right? You're going to have other better, more trained guests on, I know, throughout the season as well too. But this is fun when you and I aren't going to the game to just hop in right now and fan feedback and just stuff. But we are missing out on certain things like post-game quotes and stuff. Yeah. Ant's post-game quote started with me not moving the ball. I don't know what I was doing tonight, but I'll get back to it. We'll be all right. Self-awareness, but now we need to see him act on it, was Aaron's final comment. And yeah, I mean, that there was one possession where Ant and Shake Milton dribbled the ball for 24 seconds. I think Finch called the timeout right after that in the first. Like, it just wasn't – it seemed like Ant was really trying to get his, which is great because he's a volume scorer and he's one of the best in the league to be able to get his. But it just, again...
It's just the trust, man. It's the trust that if you get off it, it's going to come back to you. We saw so much of that in the preseason, whether it was Ant or anyone else, the ping, ping, ping plays, you know? And where were those tonight? They weren't there, and I think it was because as great as Ant was to start the game with the first 10 points, they did not establish early an intent to be a heavy ball movement team, right? So what's that balance there for them? If you want Ant to get his, but Ant probably needs to trust that if he gets off of it, it's going to come back to him. And then if and when it does come back to him, it's not going to be with 5 defenders just looking at him, right? You know, he's going to have one guy to beat and maybe another guy at the rim. Like, I think it starts with him trusting early ball movement. It's not like Ant being a point guard necessarily. Does that make sense? It's not necessarily him like moving the ball to get someone else a shot. It's him moving the ball to start the ball moving. You know?
Yeah, it's like throwing it around the horn or something, right? It's not like it's not like it has to be Ant to the first baseman. It's like trying to get the ball to someone else that then gets to you. The bench had as many assists tonight, 10, as the Wolves starters. Again, I'm just not in basketball shape yet, but I don't remember seeing that a lot. Like I really don't remember a lot of times when a game doesn't go into overtime that a team had 100 field goal attempts. I also don't remember a lot of times where 3 and just Troy, not even full Troy Brown Jr. because he played 5 minutes, had the same amount of assists. So that's a tough one. Again, to lose that on the road against a team that's probably going to be better than most people think. I know we're not going to really talk about the Raptors much, but I kind of like them, especially their 5-man lineup. I forgot that Gary Trent was on the team still, so he comes in, gives them a little something. But that's a winnable game, and will you kick yourself about it down the road? Maybe. I mean, I don't think this was a must-win 6 days before October, but you do want to eliminate some of that same stuff that made people doubt you last season at this time when it looked so herky-jerky.
To the assists thing, that was at halftime. The Wolves only had 7 assists, and listen to the halftime show or just going on Twitter, then there's a lot of only 7 assists, ball movement, this and that. Yeah, the ball movement could have been better, but they also were doing a terrible job of finishing around the basket. I looked it up at halftime. They were 10 of 28 from within 14 feet of the basket. So that's basically like floaters and at the rim. I mean, that they're a 60% team from that range, you know? So some of these, some of the issues with this game are just solved, I think, by earlier on in the game making some shots. You know, I think the ball movement is better. I think you get your assist numbers up, because then when the ball movement isn't there, you're not getting it is a snowball effect thing. I believe ball movement and finding your teammates, and they did find their teammates. Some those guys just weren't making the buckets around the basket, and maybe those weren't like direct assists, but it was like putting a guy in a position to take 1 or 2 dribbles and go get a good look at floater range, and they just were not, to my memory at least.
I did like that question though. That's something I'm gonna think about now. Is that we know how Finch wants to play basketball. We know what Finch believes basketball should be played like. It's one of the reasons he wasn't a D'Lo guy. It's because D'Lo would, dribble the hell out of the ball. When the ball is getting stagnant for stretches of time in a game, who are we going to blame? Is it on the players that are out there with the ball, or is it on Finch for not giving structure, as you've been stressing for 7 years of covering this team? So something to monitor moving forward for sure, because that was kind of a bugaboo for them tonight as well.
Let's wrap this up by talking about Jaden McDaniels' extension, just because you haven't been on here since that has happened. Obviously, I've talked about it a little bit. Weird time for me
to get happy and celebrate, but yeah.
Well, it's the end of the episode. Okay, let me give you this. I was thinking more about the extension in the time, and like I've said, I think the number is a really good number. It's lower. It's lower than what I thought, and to use a former Wolf as an example, I thought of this today. I think it's going to age like the Robert Covington contract. You remember that, like when he signed in Philly, it was like 4 years, $45 million, and Covington just became this awesome, 3-and-D player, and because he was on that contract was why. Not that the Jimmy Butler trade was a good trade for the Wolves or any like where they traded him away, but he was the central piece coming back in the Butler trade because Cov was a good player, but on a very good contract. And then again, the Wolves flipped Cov like a year and a half later, right at the deadline, and they traded that again, same contract, about 11, 12 mil a year for 2 first-round picks. And Jaden making 22 now is a little bit different than Cov making 11. It's not a huge difference. The cap has gone up by like 130% or whatever, or is up 30%. I just would be really surprised if this contract doesn't become a pretty big value for the Wolves. And sometimes I say the Bridges thing and I get pushback on that. Where I'm like, okay, Bridges signed his contract. Now it's this massive value deal. And people are like, well, it's because Bridges went and became like the dude on another team. And now he looks like an all-star. Of course, he's worth more than $20 million. So I say Covington to bring up like an in-between there of Bridges or Jaden being somewhere in between Bridges and Covington. And I would just point out that both were treated as massive values. And I would point out that Jaden has a hell of a lot more game than Covington did in terms of like being able to do more things. Like Cov was pretty much just a 3-point shooter offensively. Mm-hmm. And defensively, he was a great off-ball defender. Was not like a lockup guy at the point of attack. Like I think Jaden is great at the point of attack. I think Jaden can be really, really good off-ball as a defender. And we're anticipating, but I feel pretty confident saying he's going to have a hell of a lot more offensive game over these next 6 years he's under contract for. We're going to see so much more offensive game there. So that's a really long way of me asking you about what you think about McDaniels' extension. I just want to say that I really do think this is going to be a major value.
I think the cool thing about what we're doing now, or anytime we hop on YouTube, is that I just want the fans or the people in the comments to know that I trust you wholeheartedly, and that Ron Burgundy stuff, whatever you put on the chat, I'm going to believe. But I think Jackson Bros is right on this. That one of those first they got in a Covington trade became Jaden. So the circle of life. We come back to it. No, I'm with you. I mean, again, if you haven't checked it out in this YouTube channel, last time I'll pimp it out, is that you're going to be doing some just complete YouTube stuff. This will be on Apple and Spotify tomorrow morning, this podcast. But you did a really good, I think, 12 minutes where you just, for nerds like me, just talked basketball and Microsoft Excel, which are my 2 favorite things. And you broke down exactly where this deal fits in. And again, even just by not being, 150 instead of being 131 without the bonuses, that really matters over 5 years. Yeah. So an incredible value. I'm with you. I thought from a national perspective, the deal when it was announced was about what I thought the national perspective would be. There's a really smart person who covers the league that tweeted out, I like Jalen McDaniels, but, didn't even get the name right. Classic. But my other thing was too, and again, not a great night for this take. I just didn't love other national people or whatever being like the Jaden McDaniels extension was big. You and I both did not think it would happen before the deadline, but we weren't concerned about it not getting done. But for it to happen in the moment, and for your first reaction, whether you be someone from the Ringer or whatever, to be like, all right, who's going to trade for Carl? I just think that's kind of loser mentality. And again, we kind of were down on Carl tonight, didn't have a great game, but I think you did a really good job of painting the picture of like, you might trade Carl, you might trade Rudy, you might trade Nas, but I don't know, man. It's like, you've been to my place a couple of times out here. I have a 1-stall garage, right? Like I have a Jeep that I share with my wife. Shout out, I live, I ride, I am. But if I just like won another car, my first reaction wouldn't be like, well, I got to get a bigger house or I got to get 2 garages. It's like, I don't know. What if street parking works? Or like, what if we do tandem and we park one in front? Like, I just think that was a really lazy way to celebrate what was a really good moment and a really good value for a player who, yeah, I still don't think a lot of people know who he is and they confuse him with his much less talented brother. But that was a big thing. And one thing that I keep coming back to in the last 48 hours since that deal was announced, and I'll ask you because you're the cap expert, but you also talk to so many executives and everyone around the team. I wonder how much it helps to have that number locked in now.
Yeah, I saw some people bring that up somewhere. I don't remember where I saw that. Yeah, that is.
You know what I mean?
I don't really think about that.
Like to enter next
to know what Jaden's number is now allows you to, which I'm sure that front office is already doing, like get the ball rolling. When thinking about what are the financial steps we're going to take around this to be able to navigate the fact that we have, I think the number is Rudy, Cat, Ant, and Jaden are going to make 155 next year when the salary cap's going to be like 142. You know, like you throw Nas in there, that's 170. It's like the luxury tax line, you know? They have to be considering different options. And like breaking news, that's what front offices do all the time, is talk about considering making moves with their roster. Like the same way you do on your fantasy football. Like, I need a little bit of RB2 help. We're a little loaded at wide receiver. You know, like that is a big part of the nature of that job. So of course they're considering things that could potentially happen in a year when this team does get ridiculously expensive, but they don't know what that is. They don't know what path that is to change. And one of the paths is not changing and is like, run it back tour, you know? And
shout out Jake Kelly and fire shirts today.
Yeah, I saw those. There are options to be taken here in terms of paying the luxury tax. One thing I talked about there was like, yeah, you can't live in the second apron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
past the second apron, but you could do it for a year. Now, a lot of that's going to come down to like, are A-Rod and Lori cool with like cutting that $50 million luxury tax? And those are the elements of this we don't know. Like, yes, Sham said they're committed to paying the luxury tax. Well, no shit. They have 5 players who put them over the luxury tax. They can't not be over the luxury tax. There's such a difference between being over the luxury tax team and being over the second apron. The penalties financially are so much more severe, and the roster construction ones are more severe as well, particularly if you are above that line for multiple seasons, where the Wolves are trending right now. They are trending towards being an above the second apron team for multiple years, unless they make cost-cutting moves like trading someone or not bringing back Conley or Anderson.
Well, I don't know, for people that follow business news, Mark Lowry just bought Blue Apron. So if Mark Lowry can afford Blue Apron, he can afford the second apron. Especially if this team shows. I know tonight
you've had that one in your back.
No, I was just no, don't you. But no, back to the Jaden thing. I really thought, I was shocked that it happened. I really was. We talk about this all the time offline. I was just shocked that it happened before the deadline. I was shocked at the number that it came in at, because I had heard from other people that it was much higher than that even a week ago, whatever. So to bring him down, I think you and Jace did a really good job of being like, yeah, we love the player, talking to his agents, but like, we're not just going to give you the world. We're not going to give you half of the United States. But I started to think about, I wonder how much that's going to help with nights like tonight, right? The too big thing didn't work. But as they start to try to navigate what the next big domino is, and maybe that's at the trade deadline, maybe that's next summer, whatever, it just has to feel easier to navigate those dominoes when you already know, like, you're not also trying to fight off a max contract offer that you have to match in restricted free agency. So that too was a big win. It's a bummer that you go from the high of having him signed on Monday, something I deemed the high watermark for this franchise since Kevin Garnett was traded, that everything with the vibes were good, and then they just come out and play like absolute ass. But I wonder what it would have been like tonight with Jaden. I hope that they're being just very precautious with him. I mean, I
think cardio is a big factor.
That makes that.
In that is, it's not like he hasn't been working out or anything like that, but he's been doing the 1-on-0 drills, not the contact ones like that. Like there's an element of like just needing to get back in 5-on-5 shape that I think is, I mean, whatever, just anecdote. I watched his workout the other day, and it's like, yeah, you could kind of tell that was his first time like really getting after it in a while, because he's had the calf on ice, to literally and I guess metaphorically. So I get that sense more that it's close. I obviously everything has been very obscure with what the nature of that calf injury was, but I would just I don't know what's going on with the calf injury because they have intentionally not told us about that. But I do know that there's an element of just, as all injured players or guys who haven't been playing for a couple weeks need to get that cardio back in shape. So, you buy yourself 3-4 more days before the game on Saturday, the home opener against Miami. I don't know, but I would guess that's very much on the table for him to return.
And game shape is a real thing. You hear about that in any sport. But luckily he has been, what he said this morning at his press conference, he's been carb loading. So he should have plenty of energy. Just can he hit those cardio marks? But yeah, a tough game to bring it all the way back, 97-94. One game. We're going to be doing more of this. Shout out to Cooper Carlson, again, who is on the ones and twos here, putting out these comments. Subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, we appreciate you as well. Hop on the Patreon. We're going to be giving out tickets to a lot of games.
We got a bunch of tickets throughout the year. Like
Saturday's going to be lit.
I'm not sure what the number of games is. 20, 25 games that we're going to be giving away. Unfortunately, not for the Saturday game, but again, Wednesday against Denver, which I don't want to say it's going to be more fun than the home opener against Miami. The opponent, I think, will be more interesting to play and watch. So again,
it's going to be interesting too. I don't know how I didn't know this already, but they obviously host the Heat on Saturday. I hope everyone gets to go. That place is going to be bananas. But that'll be it'll be a back-to-back for the Miami Heat. Yeah, they'll play in Boston the night before. So God, who knows what we already creative injury reports the Heat might come up with. But you lost a game you should have won. Like, they definitely should have won this game. You did not shoot well. You did not make the little plays. But now you go home in front of the best fans in the world, in my opinion, and you try to rebound from that and blow them out, maybe. You know what I mean? Like, have a regression that's so past the mean. It's like, oh, now we shot 64% from three.
Progression.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. No, so long season. Appreciate everyone in the chat. Appreciate everyone helping us out behind the scenes. And now you get to talk to Britt about it all again tomorrow.
Yeah. I'll rewatch the game tomorrow morning and hopefully find some things that didn't stick out to me at the moment. And then also we'll get Britt's thoughts off the game there as well, and kind of talk about the NBA season off and rolling. Kyle, I appreciate you doing it. Appreciate all of you who listen to this live, and those of you who listen in the next morning. It's pod 1 of the season, which gets me excited and simultaneously anxious about. I should be able to know. It's probably like 100 episodes at least over the course of. We did like 20 this month. Yeah, it's probably 100, 120.
That's disgusting.
It is.
If my therapist listen to this, you did 20 podcasts that I helped produce, and they had played one game. You had more podcasts in the month of October than Carl and Ann have made shots. That's disgusting. Let's go home. Coop, shut it down.
All right, he's Kyle Taggy. Follow him on Twitter at Kyle Taggy. I'm Dane at Dane Moore NBA. I will talk to you tomorrow with Britt. Until then.